even then, so he invited us, and I'm very excited that Devarko is the chair because Devarko was not only my student, but we worked a lot, and right now we are mentoring several companies together on precision medicine. But what I will do, because I am from computer science, so I will
Sir,
always
I
try.
will just introduce you, sir. I will introduce you, and
Yeah,
then
yeah, sorry, yeah, please do. Maintain, yeah.
I don't want to miss the opportunity of doing that. So first of all, as Professor Baulik said, it's very easy for me to introduce him because he's my de facto co-supervisor alongside Professor Bandyopadhyay. So he's a full professor for several years in the computer science department of Jadavpur University, and he is an IEEE fellow. I mean, his biography is pretty big, but I just want to crunch it down to a shorter version, right? So he is a Humboldt fellow for several years now, and ICTP senior associate. ICTP is an organization in Italy, and a pretty respectable one. And he happens to be a senior associate of that. He's a fellow of INAE, which is the Indian National Academy of Engineers, and International Association for Pattern Recognition USA, right? And of course, as I said, IEEE as well, right? So IEEE fellowship is quite coveted one internationally. So, and he has that to his name. So he has published, I don't know how many publications, maybe 300, 400, 300 plus or something like that, including the conferences and the journals. And he has also published
Hello, can you hear me?
and he teaches machine learning, and he also works on bioinformatics, by the way, a lot apart from it. So he started on machine learning pattern recognition in his early days, but later on he sort of spent a lot of effort on bioinformatics as well, where he has published great works. Even very recently, he has published on COVID and all that in prominent journals. So I'd request sir to sort of share his screen. If he has slides, then we can just hear him out. So yes, sir. Now up to you.
Yeah, thank you, Devarko. Can you see my slides, first of all?
Yeah. I
Yeah,
can see, sir.
so I already mentioned because I was a bit astonished when Raghav was inviting me because we are a little bit old, but I follow my student. I mean, one of them is Devarko. They are doing exciting work, and I have a very big group on deep learning. So uh, I was looking for that, but as previous speaker mentioned, nowadays, I mean, you need to explain everything. So deep learning is very difficult to explain many times. So how to cope up with that? But today, I mean, I will talk on more some other issues, very fundamental things, which you can always club with other AI techniques. So I will talk more on optimization and then show a couple of examples where you can apply this kind of optimization technique. So let us start with very basic thing. So, I mean, I work quite a lot with clustering. So what is clustering? As you have data points and you want to group them into a number of groups. That number of group you may know a priori or may not know. So then clustering becomes very popular. This is a very old, 100 years old problem. And why clustering is so important? Because as soon as you have some data set, without knowing anything, what you can do, maybe you can find the mean. As you have the data set of a particular city, the temperature, pressure, humidity. So what you can do with the data set? Today it's very relevant because we are always working with big data. So what you'll do, you without any knowledge, maybe you can do find the minimum temperature, maybe mean pressure, maybe standard deviation, and then without knowing much, what you can do, you can try to find clusters. I mean, and what is clusters? I mean, by cluster we means the points or data points or patterns who are same type of nature. Okay, so can you group them together? Then that grouping can give you a lot of information. So it's a very old technique, but even then nowadays with huge amount of diverse data set, always there is a demand to find a better clustering technique. So what we did around 2002-3, so these are called like, there are very well-known clustering technique called FCM, then you have K-mean, and then you have DB-scan, so many algorithms are there. So what is basically FCM or K-mean? Basically, if you give an object, then try to partition them in such a way object belongs to one group or similar. Now, how you are measuring the similarity? Maybe that is interesting because it depends quite a lot with the domain you are working. When you are working with market-based data, when you are working with mobile data, when you are working with biological data, the distance may be different. Okay, so but more or less, generally for K-mean and FCM, people generally try to find Euclidean distance. And according to that distance, they try to find the grouping. Somebody, who are good in statistics, they can use Mahalanobis distance or Virchow distance. So many distance criteria there. So this is one very interesting technique, clustering. You can use in many domains without knowing much. Clustering can be used. So around 2003, when we came to work in the domain, we noted most of the clustering technique available in the literature. They are basically, you can see, what they do, like K-mean or FCM. So given if you, both for FCM and K-mean, the assumption is that you know the number of clusters before it. For example, assume there is a data set, a biological data set, and somebody is telling there are only cancer and non-cancer, so malignant, benign. So you understand two class. But tomorrow, if somebody tell among the cancer also you have different stage, maybe 4 stage. So number of classes become 5. So if you do not know how many groups are there or clusters are there, it is more challenging. Then you need to take help of more statistical parameter like cluster validity index or something like that. We also did a lot of research way back in 2003-4, but I'm not going to the domain. Let us assume we know now number of clusters. So what you do, so this kind of K-mean or FCM, one is fuzzy, another one is non-fuzzy. What they do, they randomly pick up K centers, and then using that K center, they try to partition the data set. And every time, basically, they form a matrix like K by N. N is the number of data point, and each position of the matrix determine the membership of ith point into kth cluster. So that's the way it measures. So every time they recompute the centers and the membership matrix, and finally they converge when there is no shift in the position of the center. So it's a very simple algorithm. You will get all the algorithms in the website, the code, everything available. But when we started working on that, we finally understood this is a very, very kind of algorithm which optimize one objective. And this is the objective, very simple. It is double summation of every point, distance of every point from its own center. So mu ik is the membership of k point in ith cluster. M is the fuzzy exponent. If you put m equal to 0, it's a k-mean. If you generally FCM, you put m equal to 2, but you can vary m, and that's the way you can put a lot of uncertainty or fuzziness into the system itself. So your fuzzy parameter is controlled by m, but if you want to do it non-fuzzy, you put m equal to 0. For FCM, they put m equal to 2. But as a computer science student, for me, it is very important because this is a single objective and this is a greedy method. In computer science, we call them greedy. And as soon as you are using kind of greedy, there is a huge chance that it may trap to local optima, which is suboptimal. But in the real life, we try to go to global optima or close to global optima. So it's very interesting, all these techniques, because they are single objective and most of the times algorithms are greedy in nature. So how to come out of that? So with one of my students, we started working on that. The first thing, you can do it just by introducing some meta-heuristic technique with this kind of K-mean or FCM. Then you can come out of that greediness, and you may push into local optima. But the second interesting problem is that is every clustering is a single objective problem or it's a multi-objective. So what do you mean by multi-objective? The multi-objective means at the same time you need to optimize more than one objective simultaneously. So this is interesting. So in the real life, we find almost all problems are multi-objective nature. So we argued, clustering, why clustering people treat them as a single objective? So our answer was no, that's a, wrong thing. We should treat them also as a multi-objective problem. And then what we did, we tried to use some well-known platform which was already available. I'm just keeping most of the slide. So for multi-objective, those who are very new, so let me give you a little bit of introduction to multi-objective. It's itself a new subject. People in, you can have a crash course on that. It's a like 20 hours lecture course. So basically in a multi-objective is very, very basically these problems are introduced into mechanical civil engineering. Then everybody started using it because it is very, very popular in economics. So what happened, basically you are trying to find a decision variable where you have a lot of inequality and equality constraint. And basically there are number of objectives, not one objective you are trying to solve at a time. So so basically let me show you that when you are talking about one objective, it is very easy to handle, because as soon as you are talking about one objective, you give me two solutions, I can tell which one is better than the other one. So it's very easy to choose one of them. But for multi-objective, it will happen many times that both in one objective, one solution is better than the other. On the other objective, the other is better than one. So then how do you take a decision? It's not easy. So they are called non-dominating. So in multi-objective, what happens? If you have two solutions, A and B, then we will tell FA dominate FB if for all objective, FA is better than or equal to FB, but strictly for one objective, it is better than FB. Then it is called, FA is called dominating FB. So in multi-objective, always we look for domination and non-domination kind of thing. Okay, so let me show you one example. It's for function optimization. It will be clear to you. As you have two objectives, F1 and F2, and you are trying to maximize both of them. Okay, so this is a graph. So assume first time you run your algorithm, you have one solution, solution one. So as soon as you have one solution, basically that's a solution you are looking for, so you cannot throw it out. Assume after second iteration, you got another solution, 5. So if you compare between 1 and 5, you can see 1 is better than 5 in F2. F2 objective, 1 is better than 5, whereas in F1 objective, 5 is better than 1. So what that means? That means 1 and 5, they are non-dominating to each other. Nobody dominates the other. So the idea is that if you run the algorithm, you have two solutions, then it is better to keep both of them, because you do not know what the end user is looking for. Fine. So let us take an example of TSP. TSP means traveling salesman problem, very interesting graph problem, where basically you are trying to find a Hamiltonian cycle, okay, in the graph. And then assume basically you have two objective, cost and time. And assume that one solution is better in cost and another one is better in time. So what you are looking for? When you are running the algorithm, many times you are not confident. What the end user is looking for. So you might need to have an interaction with the end user. So these problems are coming from economics. First time it was introduced by Pareto, and Pareto was a very well-known economist, and he got final Nobel Prize for that. But then we find it's a lot of application in different areas. Next you go to, assume again you have gone to another iteration and you got another solution too. So now if you compare, you see 1 and 2 are, nobody is dominating each other. But if you carefully look towards 2 and 5, 2 is dominating 5 in both the objectives. So what that means? As soon as you have a solution 2, you can throw 5 out. Correct. So you do not need 5 anymore, because 2 is better in both the objective. So that means 2 dominate 5, but 1 and 2 do not dominate anyone. So they are non-dominating. So again, 3, 4, if you consider 1, 2, 3, 4, correct. 2, 3, 4, all of them dominate 5. So as soon as you have one of them, you can throw the other. So the concept of domination, non-domination is coming in this way. And in case of single objective, while we always look for one solution, so we are going for better, and better. But for multi-objective, we don't do that. We try to find this. If you join the all non-dominating solutions like 1, 2, 3, 4, they call Pareto optimal surface. So in case of multi-objective, our goal is to push the surface as much as possible. Okay, so this is very interesting, but this itself is subject, new subject. But when we started working with clustering, we realized that clustering problem need to model like a multi-objective one. And then, I mean, in the literature already there were so many algorithms. So NSGO2 was by Kallanmoy Deb, and he was in IIT Kanpur, now moved to Michigan. So there are algorithms called SPA2, PACE. I mean, these are from ETA Zurich group. And then we also have our own algorithm. So Eric Gittler was one of the, good person from ETA. So they developed a lot of algorithms. We also developed one, AMOSA, around 2008. And AMOSA basically based on another meta-heuristic called simulated annealing, which is coming from physics. And AMOSA beat others because we developed our algorithm later. So we knew how to handle this. But then, NSGO2 has been modified to NSGO2, 3, 4. Every year they have a new version, but we have only one version. So you can take any of the platform, and then model your algorithm on the basis of that. As I mentioned, these are very, very attractive algorithms. You can use it in any domain. So they are coming from civil, mechanical, all these, but you can use it equally, like Kallanmoy Deb is from mechanical, but we are from computer science, so we know how to use it in the other domain also. So in clustering, what we did, before us, every people want to solve it as a single objective one. I'm skipping the detail. So what we did, so we first time told, let us not take one objective. So you can take, you might remember that, JM was the objective that was optimizing by FCM, but we told why only you depend on one? Let us depend on more than one. So we started with 2. And for multi-objective, it is always advisable. You take the objective in such a way, they are contradictory in nature. Then only you will get the beauty of the algorithm. So we started taking more than one objective, and this is called Jivani index. This is another very, very interesting statistical parameter for clustering. We also develop our own index. But I want to show you the result. How the clustering method is changing. Okay, so let me give you another trick. We solve the problem in a different way. So assume that you have a clustering problem and you model in a multi-objective problem. Now, if you model in a single objective way, always you are looking for one solution. And in a clustering, what do you mean by a solution? A solution means partition of the data set. Okay, you partition the data set into k number of clusters. Okay, that is it can be mobile data, it can be biological data, it can be any data set. But as soon as you are using multi-objective, so what you are looking for, you are not looking for one solution, you are looking for a set of solutions. Okay, so a set of solutions, you are basically looking for, all of them are, which are non-dominating to each other, and they form the Pareto optimal set. So let us assume you started with one clustering and you have 11 data point and you run one multi-objective clustering algorithm, and then you finally have 8 different solutions. Okay, S1 to S8. Now the interesting question, which one you want to give to the end user? Because you have 8 different alternatives. So what do you want to give to the end user? So it's very interesting. Sometimes what we do, we take a interaction, we talk to the end user. So this is called, in the data mining, interaction to the user is very, very interesting. So you can interact to the end user and you can ask him which solution looks better. For some problems is very easy, like TSP. If you give me 2 solutions, I can look toward the time and cost, and immediately I can understand. Maybe my time is very important. I may lose maybe 10,000 rupees more. So I will go for one solution. But clustering is absolutely difficult, because in 2-dimensional or 3-dimensional, you can visualize. But if your clustering is being done on more than 5 dimension or any more dimension, you cannot visualize. So it's very difficult for the end user to find out which one is better. So there is one technique called gap statistics. By using that kind of technique, you may think about something, but we started asking ourselves. So these are, you see, these are very, very good solutions. So can we combine them and find an even better solution? The answer was yes. You can take a trick, and by doing that trick, you can find a much better solution. But today, last 10 years, I work quite a lot with game theory. So if you are very good in game theory, you will understand these are basically a problem which you can solve using game theory. So you can, design an Nash equilibrium and accordingly you can solve the problem. But you see how easily you can also solve this problem. So I'm just, maybe 1 minute I can spend on this slide. Assume you have 11 points and 4 clusters. So what does the solution mean? The solution means the 11 point need to distribute in 4 clusters. Let us assume your first solution is like this one, S1. So what S1 is telling, first solution is telling, first point is going to first cluster, second point first cluster, third point first cluster, fourth point second cluster, fifth point second cluster, and so on. So you see, this is the distribution of the point into different clusters. And what about the second one? Second one is saying something different. So all 8 solutions, they will tell different thing to you. Now what you can do very easily, you can take a vote. Okay, you can take a vote. Sometimes we call it consensus. So you take a consensus. You see, if you see the all 8 solution, you see in the first position, everybody agreed. That means everybody is happy that the first point is going to cluster 1. So then we can conclude possibly the first one is clustered in the right way. So then we tell, okay, we are happy with that. What about the second one? You see, most of them are telling it's going to cluster 1, except solution 2 and solution 8. Now, you can choose the threshold. If you think that, okay, I will go for 50% agreement, then definitely here is more than 50% agreement. So that you need to choose how much agreement you want to have. So we choose 50% agreement. So then I will tell my second point is also lightly clustered. But you look carefully to the third and fourth and you see there is a mess. So they have a lot of confusion. So as soon as you have a lot of confusion, you don't do that. So what you tell that I do not know anything. Okay, we are very confused. So you put asterisk mark. So in this way, for all 11 points, we noted that if we took 50% consensus, 1, 2, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 10, 11, they are fine. You are happy with them, but you are unhappy with 3, 4, and maybe 8. So what you do now, basically you understand, as soon as you are talking about clustering, there is no training point. So as soon as you have no training point, it's a very, so you cannot use any supervised learning. Like you cannot use SVM, you cannot use decision tree, you cannot use Bayes classifier or deep learning, you cannot do anything. So you need to have data set without any training point, correct? But as soon as I run my master multi-objective clustering and then I do some consensus, I'm sure that these points are more or less lightly classified. So out of 11 points, we are happy with 8 points. Now you take this 8 point as a training point and treat the rest few points at your test point. So this is, you see, this is a very, intelligent trick. So if you trick that your clustering problem, which is unsupervised one, is changing into a supervised one, then you train any classifier. You can train a SVM or anything. You can take Bayesian, you can take any classifier, or deep learning, or maybe random forest. You can choose anything. So I want to show you quickly result. That time gene clustering was very popular. Nowadays you all understand only doing gene clustering is not enough. You'll have to do methylation, you'll have to do epigenetic study, everything. But I want to show just how good the clustering result is. So you already know the gene, you have set of genes, you have a cDNA technology, very quickly you can get this matrix. And for a computer science student, for me, it's a time series data. So your time series is changing. So what is the goal? So can you, tell these genes, without knowing much, can we group into the same group? What's the advantage of that? Advantage is that if the group genes are in the same group, then possibly their function will also be same. So that is, they will be functionally close to each other. Then maybe you can go for more expensive experiment like structure matching or something like that. And then if you know 2 genes are very close to each other, you find there is a new disease and you find one particular gene is responsible for that, but still you do not have a medicine. Then what you can do, you can try with the alternative medicine, which was involved for the other genes. So this kind of application is there. So gene clustering was very popular around 2002-3, and but nowadays you need to have methylation and epigenetic everything together. So I want to show you some results. So for me, it's a time series data, but then you see the result. Basically, at that time we took all the data set from public domain. I mean, nowadays, I mean, you understand, it's 2003-4. The public data set was not that rich, but nowadays you can get huge amount of public data set also. So these are the data set we used, but you see the clustering result. I mean, that is interesting. So, I mean, we after clustering, how good your clustering, that can be measured by another index. Okay, so here we use another index called Salute index, which is very popular, and higher value Salute index range from -1 to +1, and higher value of Salute index will tell you it's a bit better clustering. But see, this is a statistical parameter. Okay, but you go to the result. I mean, you see what algorithm we have used for the data set. Basically, that at that time there was a very interesting single objective clustering algorithm. It is called CRC, Chinese Restaurant Clustering. My student knew at that time it was very popular. SOM is neural network based clustering, self-organizing map. You have like average linkage. I mean, you know, these are hierarchical clustering, very popular for biology students. This is single objective genetic algorithm. This is FCM. So last 5 are all single objective, where the top 3 are multi-objective. And where it is written SVM, that means you are combining the Pareto optimal solution using support vector machine. Okay. And where it is not, that means you are picking up one of the best solution, not combining them. And there can be crisp or fuzzy, that putting the value of changing the value of M from 0 to 2, you can change the algorithm to crisp to fuzzy. But I mean, this you can read by yourself. But interesting thing is that if you look very carefully, you see, I mean, we are very happy to note that all the 3 algorithms on the top were beating all the 5 algorithms on the bottom. That means your multi-objective clustering is more powerful than single objective clustering. And definitely when you are trying to combine the Pareto optimal using support vector machine, you are getting the better result in compared to the other. And then we tried with different kernel also. These are very common kernel, linear, polynomial, sigmoid, RBF. And we noted, I mean, according to the kernel also, the result is changing. In our case, RBF was giving better result. That's the reason I tell my student, I mean, you design your own kernel depending on the domain. And one of my students also did PhD on designing kernel. So it's very important you design your own kernel. Don't blindly follow any kernel, because these are very standard kernel. It may do very well, it may not do well, but if you can write your own kernel, that is very, very interesting. But you will know that if I give all the statistical parameter, biology people won't be happy. So we did one heat map and cluster profile plot. It's not bad. So you see, this is for each data, and each data has 6 clusters. More or less, we were happy that it was rightly clustered, but I was more happy to see this result. This is cluster profile plot, heat map plot, but we were more happy to see this result. This is a p-value, and as soon as you have that p-value, so people can tell you that you are getting it by chance. So you see, as soon as we plot the p-value, our multi-objective algorithm, where we are combining with the support vector machine, that is significantly better than the other. Very close is maybe self-organizing map, single objective GA, and other 2 multi-objective. Okay, but definitely your multi-objectives is much better, and that gives us more confidence that okay, we are going in the right direction. Okay, so my conclusion is that, so the conclusion is like that. Whenever you are using any single objective algorithm, fuzzy, CMIN, K-mean, there are many. I mean, DBSCAN is there. Most of them are basically greedy in nature. So as soon as you have greedy in nature, it may stuck into local optima. So what people do, you can run the algorithm many times, and then you can find one of the solution. If you are lucky, one of them will go towards the global. You can take that. But what we told, I mean, you can mix a little bit of meta heuristic, and then the problem is itself will be solved. But more interesting thing is that all algorithms are single objective, and we, after working almost 20 years, we understood the data set is different in different domain. And so you cannot depend on one clustering technique or one objective. So let us use more than one objective. Okay, so that is our, we found it's very interesting, and this is the algorithm we use for biology, but you can use for any other domain. And accordingly, you can choose a new distance criteria also. So, I want to show you some reference, and then I will switch to my next slide, where I will talk more on another one, but we'll use the same algorithm. So the first book is the first book in the world on multi-objective clustering. And then we have very good paper at that time in bioinformatics, and people were very happy because we applied it for other domain also. You need to tune it a little bit, but people were very happy at that time to see this kind of multi-objective things, because it's very powerful and it can definitely improve your baseline algorithm. Okay, so maybe 1 minute I can share my another slide. So let me stop this slide sharing, and then in the meantime, if you have any question, you can ask me. Okay, and let me share one more slide, not this one. Yeah, so can you see it? Hello?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so now we'll use the same technique, because I want to show how powerful. Today you are using deep learning. So even the deep learning architecture can be designed by all these powerful tools. So because you know that deep learning today, deep learning architecture designing is extremely different. You take a lot of different issues. You need to, you can be intelligent, you can take some intelligent decision. But here, if you use some multi-objective technique, it's very, very routine. They themselves can solve the problem. So second test case, I will want to show it for a drug design case. So you see how drug design is can be done using. So drug design, earlier days, it was by observation, it was by chance. Or then later on, maybe you can do high throughput screening. Okay, but if you look very carefully, for a drug to come into the market, it takes 10 to 15 years. Okay, approximate cost of a drug around 2014 was $2.6 billion. It's a huge market. And Debarko can tell better than me. And as far as I understand, from Indian industry, number of drugs is almost zero. Very difficult, because you cannot pump so much money, 2.6 billion. And if it's failed, then you are in trouble. Okay, so that's the reason. What happened? People, almost 15 years back, they started talking about rational drug design. What is rational drug design? So you design the drug rationally. That means don't go for anything. So basically, as soon as you are talking about a drug, you understand it's a chemical compound. So basically, you need to talk about biochemistry more. Okay, but in your lab, if you do it blindly, that means, so you will try many things and most of the things will fail. Okay, so what, Professor Peter Kalman, so he was from Adelaide, and Peter was the first person who designed a drug completely in the computer, and that is called rational drug design. What is the rational? The rational thing is that, you see how the drugs work. Most of the times you have an active site. So virus attacked, you have an active site, and you want to put some protein to block the active site. Now it's a, you understand, now it's a very, very interesting problem, because if you have a drug, I think somebody need to switch off their mic, because some noise is coming. Okay, so idea is that, assume you have a cavity, okay, or you have an active site. So without knowing the active site, if you design something that may not fit into the active site. So using computer, you can do it much easily. So what we started doing, I mean, people tried it. I mean, it's a computational geometry, problem of computational geometry. But we tried to solve it using multi-objective technique. So what we did, I mean, we want to find a suitable ligand which can bind into the active site, and you need to make sure that when it is binding to the right place, it won't bind to the other one. So if it bind to the other one, then your normal activity will lose. So that's the reason you need all the clinical trial and everything. Correct. So what you are looking for designing a suitable ligand, and then using all the chemical groups, and then what happened, using computer, you tell these are my model, but finally you'll have to synthesis into the lab, and then you'll have to go for clinical trials. Okay, these two are there. So the idea is that earlier your total time was 15 years. So you cut down, like maybe your clinical trial will take 5 years, but that 10 years can be reduced to 6 months. So total designing time will come down, your cost will come down drastically. So that's the reason people started using them. There are a lot of interesting software available. There's a software called GOLD, genetic algorithm based ligand design, but our software is much better because we use the concept of multi-objective technique. So I will show you some result. So what we did, as soon as you are using any multi-objective algorithm, first thing you need to do is to understand what are the objective you want to optimize. Okay, so you see, I mean, what objective we have chosen. So we have chosen 3 different objectives. One is energy, another is Tanimoto coefficient, and oral biodiversity measure. But you will have to choose the objective in such a way, I mean, you need to represent into some mathematical form, because ultimately you need to map it into a computer, and computer don't understand oral biodiversity. So you need to give a statistical thing. Okay, so I mean, while we are computing the energy, we noted, I mean, energy have so many components, because if you really work with molecule, so what the idea is that when you are designing a molecule, then the total energy of the molecule should be as less as possible. Then it will be stable. So your synthesizable capability will be more. At the same time, the total energy of binding should be less also, because I had a physics, it is very easy for me to understand all these things. Okay, so when we went to the energy component, we noted the most important energy, or almost we covered everything: the van der Waals energy, electrostatic energy, bonds stretching energy, angle bending energy, and torsional energy. There are 5 energies. So combining them into one objective, and then we take Tanimoto coefficient and oral biodiversity. Today, if you think something is more important, you can push that one into the objective also, because there is no limit how many objectives you can push. But make sure you are choosing your objective in the right way. Then what we did, basically everything we are doing using computer. So we target, because we are trying to have want to show our result onto tuberculosis. Tuberculosis is very, very interesting subject, at least from countries like India. And we thought that TB has, we have recovered all the TB and there will be no more TB. But now we understand the virus is, the bacteria is coming back. So we targeted that one, and what we did, we target RECA. RECA is a protein in the bacteria which do the damage control. And DNA, basically, as soon as you put some medicine, the DNA is damaged. And if the damaged DNA cannot be reconfigured, then you will be recovered from the disease. But inside RECA, there is, RECA has the capability to repair the damage. So that means again the disease will come. So we targeted RECA, okay? And you can see that this is the active site. In the gold one, you can see the active site. So as soon as you understand the active site, so you need to understand the coordinates. So this is, I already told, it's a computational geometry problem. So if you understand the coordinate in 3-dimensional space, then you try to design a molecule such that it will fit well into that, that space. So it's a computational geometry problem I mentioned already. So what we did, we used our our multi-objective technique. So, and then what we find that we not only design all the drugs, all the molecule which are already there in the market. So these were the available drugs or molecule in the market, but also at the same time we design very new. So we are very happy because our technique was able to design all the molecules which were available in the market. At the same time, he designs some new molecules. Now, what is the importance of all these molecules? So today you know, every drug you are giving due to drug resistance, maybe after 2-3 years or 5 years down the line, that may not work. The concept is that if you have so many drugs, even then after some time, all of them may not work. Then why are you looking for new drugs? So maybe these are the potential one. But I already mentioned this all we did in computer lab. So now you need to go to the chemistry lab. You need to design this molecule. Designing, I think most of the time you will be able to design. You will be able to design this molecule. Only problem is synthesizable easy, but you'll have to check whether it is binding properly. It may bind and then it may go out. But as the total amount of energy of the molecule is very low, we understood their synthesizable capability and is much more than common. And many molecules was also part of the Cambridge lab. We finally look into that. So these molecules are there. So, and then basically you'll have to go for clinical trial. There is no alternative way. You will have to start from some animal and then you'll have to go for human trial, because without human trial you cannot use that medicine. Why? Because the drug may be working very well for your TB. It is going to the right position, may block some active site, but at the same time it may block some other active site also, and that may create disease. Like assume that you arrest TB, but at the same time you have some another disease. So nobody will take that. That is called, that's the reason people go for clinical trial. So you have to do clinical trial. Now today, when I was working with COVID data, I have a lot of discussion with people like Devarko, who are one of the best scientists India has produced, with Madam will be giving a lecture. So we have a very group around the world. We think about what a country like, India, because, do. So during COVID, we have a very interesting paper where we studied all this with a solution with, flammant. So that means you can use either some drug that has been already used for other one, or maybe something that we can extract from plant. And so what you can do, you can push them without doing the clinical trial. You understand? As soon as COVID came, there was no medicine. So you need to wait for 2 years, and most of the times you are looking for all those big countries who can push a lot of money. $2.6 billion, and that maybe, it can be failed experiment also. So alternatively, what you can do, if you are looking for chemical compound, can you find any other drugs which has been used for other? So that means already clinical trial has been done. Or if you won't get that, can you get something from plant? Because in one of our study, we noted orange is one of the very, very good property which can restrict COVID. So that means, you can go to a very poor, even poor person and tell you take more orange. At least then your chance of attacking COVID, even if it attack, the binding will be loose, will be less, because the medicine will come after 2 years. And when I was doing the experiment with another of my colleague in Jadavpur, we saw there is a very, very interesting drug which is being used for colon cancer. Is very active for COVID, but it was patented by US company because we did a lot of analysis and we find that may be a very good drug. But you will be surprised to know the price of the drug. It is $10,000. It is $10,000 because it was patented for colon, and it's one of the very good drug for colon cancer. But can you use it for an Indian scenario? $10,000, who is going to use that? So that is the interesting thing. When you are going for drug, you need to think about common people. So this kind of rational drug design become very important, not only in advanced country, but in our country also. Today, when I work with my student, I always tell, can you get a medicine from Indian plant? Because whatever medicine a company will produce, they will take it patent. They will patent by themselves, and the price can be very different. Okay. So it can be very high because most of the time it can go for monopoly until and unless you have more competitor in the market. But then what you will do with the poor people of our country or other country? So you need to depend on something. So that's the reason last 2-3 years after COVID, I am telling my student again and again, when you are trying to solve all this type of problem, so drug design problem, think about Indian context, think about African context also. A drug discovered in USA cannot be used immediately here because its cost can be very high. So what alternative you can push? So the idea is that, is there any drug which is already existing in the market with low price can be used for that? Because clinical trial you do not need for that. At the same time, can you get some plant from the plant? Can you have seen? So for the COVID, we find something which was very interesting. We published in a Nature journal. It was very, very appreciated. And that student is a biochemist. She is very specialized in biochemistry. And I today also I talked to her because she is very interested to develop something from plant. So as soon as you have chemical compound, then you need to go for clinical trial. If it is not already been used, as soon as you will do chemical trial, lot of cost will be involved into that. And no company will give you freely. Because every company is doing a business, you need to remember it. So you need to find your own solution. So as soon as COVID came, so India, because we are very good in one part, like vaccination, we are one of the best in the world. But we need to design our own way, to design our own molecule, maybe from plant, maybe from some other molecule that has already been tested. So we need to be more advanced than advanced country to serve the number of people, large number of people in the country. So let me finish maybe, but this is one of the good tools which you can use for even rational drug design or any other problem. But at the same time, today I will tell you, not only you use multi-objective technique, you combine with deep learning, you combine with other techniques, because hybridization is very, very interesting. If you can hybridize more than one technique, always you will get much better result. But as my last speaker also mentioned, as soon as you are going for healthcare, explainability become extremely important. No doctor will take your suggestion until and unless you explain it properly, that this is the way we should go. Correct? So your doctor will only take your suggestion when it is explained very, very nicely. So explainable AI become very, very important. But at the same time, you should remember that hybridization is very, very interesting. Don't depend on one technique, depends on multiple techniques, and then your solution will be better. Okay, so these are some reference. You can see their old reference because we are doing this work 2003, 2014, and a lot of softwares are already available in our website. You can download them and you can use it for different purpose also. So let me stop here. If you have any question, I think they were going in time, correct? So if you have any question, I will be happy.
Yeah,
please send me mail. I will get back to you. Okay.
Yeah, you are perfectly on time, and thank you so much for speaking so energetically about all this very interesting works and their implications in drug design and ligand receptor binding and all these things. So I will just request so there's one question that is on the chat. I will read it out for you, sir. How can we use this concept, multi-objective algorithm, to work against antibiotic resistance? Can it be modified? Can we modify already existing drugs, or can it be used for designing new drugs?
Sure, very, very interesting. Very nice question. And Debarko, we discuss all these things. So this is very interesting area. This is called kind of reverse engineering. Right. So if you know some molecule and using that molecule, you can use multi-objective techniques. So that is very interesting because what you mentioned, I tell my student, because most of the time the algorithms start from a blind one. Okay. But if you have some information, can you push into that? Okay, and start from that. But at the same time, you should understand that this is fitting a molecule into the active size. So not only, so when you are using some molecule, you need to know also the coordinates of the active site very well. So that is you are getting from crystallography or some 3D, some 3D domain. So crystallography is one of them. So you need to know that coordinate, and then you can fit some molecule. You can start from something, you can redesign. That is possible. But if it is a chemical compound which has already been not been used, then you'll have to go for clinical trial, definitely. But this is interesting. I mean, definitely you can start from something. It is called informed search. I'm not starting from a blind place. Okay, informed search is always better than uninformed search. So any more question? Or thank you very much for your patience. Yes, thank you. Or you can send me mail or later on.
Is there any? Yeah. So is there any other question, guys? I think you can ask directly to the speaker, or you can send a email to him. I think he's
Thank you, John.
email address.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. Yes.